Good morning to everyone. Yes, I'm going to be talking about regulatory procedure for the satellite systems not subject to coordination. And then I will also touch a little on earth stations. So Ceci has presented the part that is subject to coordination. So both subject and not subject to coordination, these are the procedures under the coordination approach that Alexon had presented this morning. So what procedure for not subject to coordination? This is applicable to non-geostationary satellite networks. So in general, non-geostationary satellite networks, the use of the frequency bands are not subject to coordination. So to know if they are subject to coordination, you have to check whether they are subject to a specific coordination procedure under Section 2 of Article 9. Okay, I will touch a little bit more on this after this. Now, for geostationary satellite networks, as a default, okay, all frequency bands that is used by geostationary satellite networks are subject to coordination. Okay, only the use of the inter-satellite links of the geostationary satellite network that is communicating with a non-geostationary satellite network, which are not subject to coordination procedure under Section 2 of Article 9. Only that part of the inter-satellite link is not subject to coordination. So what does it mean by not subject to coordination? So to understand what is not subject to coordination, you have to understand what is subject to coordination. So the coordination procedures, Ceci had already gone through quite a lot of details. They are specified in Section 2 of Article 9. For example, for geostationary satellite networks, that would be 9.7 and so on. So when we refer to not subject to coordination, it means frequency assignments for satellite networks or systems that are not subject to any of these coordination procedures spelled out in Section 2 of Article 9. All right, Section 2 of Article 9 contains the coordination procedures. However, these networks that are not subject to coordination are still subject to Article 9, which is they have to go through the advanced publication procedure of Section 1 of Article 9. And they have to go through the commenting and resolution of difficulties of subsection 1A of Article 9. So how do you know if a frequency band is subject to coordination? Okay, you have to check the table of frequency allocation, read the footnotes or the detailed footnotes to see if there's something that says, okay, it is subject to agreement under 9.21, it is subject to coordination under 9.11a, and so on. But pay attention that especially for 9.11a, in some cases they may not, you may not get the direct message from the footnote. You have to still refer to the table that I showed here, 9.11a-1 of the rules of procedure, which lists more details because of that if one service is subject to 9.11a, then another service that is of equal rights will be also subject to 9.11a. So it is very important to check this. Now, if you check that your proposed use of the frequency bands are not listed in here or in the footnotes stating that it is subject to coordination, then you can say that it is not subject to coordination. So not subject to coordination, you have to start off with API. Ceci has also mentioned the AN procedure. So the first step is the API. API is a mandatory procedure before you notify. And similarly, you have 7 years to bring into use the assignments from the date of receipt of the API. You have to submit the information listed in Annex 2 of AP4, Appendix 4. Now, in the advanced publication stage, there is no formal examination under 1131. All right. However, the BR, we check in detail whether the frequency bands are subject to coordination to be sure that you're going through the correct procedure and to make sure that the mandatory information is provided. And when we find that these bands are not, any of the frequency bands submitted are not in accordance with the table of frequency allocation, then we will advise the administration that they should request for 4.4, okay, which I will talk a little bit more later. And then the result of this work, we will then publish in an API special section. Following the publication of the API A special section, which will contain all the detailed characteristics of the network, other administrations have 4 months to submit comments to satellite orbit and frequency assignments. Bureau will consolidate these comments and publish them in API B special section. Okay, following that, both administrations shall endeavor to cooperate in joint efforts. And if there's any difficulty, they can always request Bureau for assistance. Also, since I'm talking about commenting here, I also would like to mention about commenting procedures to notification. Under 1128.1, it is also possible to submit comments to a notification that is published in Part 1S. So then I talk about notification for recording in the master register. This has been mentioned already several times, and you're going to hear a lot about it throughout this seminar and workshop. So any frequency assignments shall be notified to the Bureau if the use of that assignment is capable of causing harmful interference to any service of another administration, or if the assignment is to be used for international radio communication, etc., etc. Okay, there are lots of reasons why you will need to notify. However, for satellites, they are going in orbit, so they are definitely capable of causing harmful interference to any service of another administration, so therefore they have to be notified. Now, notification must be received by the Bureau by the end of the 7-year limit, which is counting from the date of receipt of the API. Again, information to be submitted is in Annex 2 of Appendix 4. Bureau will check for completeness and correctness. At the notification, we do check this technical and regulatory examination under 1131, which is a compliance with the table of frequency allocation, verification of power limits like PFD, ERRP, etc. And then we will give findings, and if it's a favorable finding, we publish in Part 2S and record it in the Master International Frequency Register. And if it is unfavorable, we will return it to the administration, which I will talk a little bit more right after this. It's because I need to explain a little bit about the non-conforming assignments. So for assignments that are not in conformity with the table of frequency allocation, okay, they shall not cause harmful interference to and shall not claim protection from harmful interference from those that are in use according to the table of frequency allocation. Okay, this is under the prohibition of number 4.4. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that at the API, when you submit an assignment that the Bureau realizes that it's not in accordance with the table of frequency allocation, we will request that you submit this under 4.4. Now, very important is that such assignment are still required to be notified. Okay, you must notify the assignments even if they are under 4.4, even if they are recorded for information purpose only. So, yeah, something to take note of is that when you are notifying the assignments under 4.4, the notifying administration shall provide a commitment that it has determined that these assignments will not cause harmful interference to stations of other administrations operating in conformity with the RR. And it has identified the measures that it would take in order to comply with the requirement to immediately eliminate harmful interference. This is very important. So administration notify, please take care of this. So I mentioned a bit earlier about returning the notice if it's unfavorable. Please note that Okay, those assignments that receive unfavorable finding under 1131, for example, due to non-compatible frequency allocation of PF or PFD exceedance, etc., will be returned to the administration under 11.36. Bureau will send a communication to the administration explaining the reason for the unfavorable finding and an indication of the appropriate action. Important to note that these assignments cannot be resubmitted from retaining the original date of receipt. Okay, so if it's returned under with an unfavorable finding under 11.31, and you would like to submit again, whether with the same parameters, just requesting for 4.4, or change of parameters to make sure that you comply with the limits or with the RR, this will be given a new date, okay? New date of receipt. New date of receipt means that if it's past the 7 year, it is no longer possible. The satellite network may be suppressed. And also new date means that we will process it again and we will charge a new cost recovery fee. Some specific regulatory procedures that are applicable to those assignments that are not subject to coordination. One is Resolution 32, which is for non-GSO networks identified as short duration mission. For this type of networks, there are various conditions that they must meet. For example, they must use only frequency bands not subject to coordination. Total number of satellites must be less or equals to 10, and the period equals to 3 years. However, using this short duration mission under Resolution 32 does provide some benefit in the sense that if you're using the 137 megahertz and the 148 megahertz for space operation service, it is exempted from coordination procedures. But of course, you have the condition is that you must meet a lot of other criteria. And then the other procedure that has just been adopted at WRC 23 is concerning the inter-satellite links under Resolution 679. So WRC 23 has adopted this resolution to allow the use of inter-satellite links for the frequency bands listed here. And the service has to be inter-satellite service, which the class of station will be ES. And this is not subject to coordination, so APIs have to be submitted. But note that the API has to be submitted for both satellites at both ends of this inter-satellite link. I'll just talk a little bit more about short duration mission. There's some difference in regulatory procedures. I just list some of them here, like period of validity cannot be extended beyond 3 years. Because if you are aware about normal frequency assignments, they can request for extension of period of validity under Resolution 4. But for short duration mission, this is not possible. So you may then ask, okay, my satellite is still operational, and after 3 years, what shall I do? Bureau is going to cancel. Well, you have to submit a new API and start the whole process again. All right. I will not go through too much details, just to say that things like modifications under 1143A, suspension of assignments under 1149 for frequency assignments that have been submitted under a short duration mission. I will speak a little bit about lunar communications as this is getting quite popular. So this is submitted with a reference body of L, okay, in our system. And the service, if you want to provide communications on the moon, if you submit it, it should be under the Space Research Service or the Space Operations Service. If you wish to submit under other services, it has to be only under 4.4. And just a reminder that because I mentioned Space Research Service can be used, make sure don't use those that are allocated for deep space. Well, the moon is not far enough to be in the deep space. Then the stations that you will submit, whether the orbiters, the landers, or rovers that are operating on the surface of the moon, they should be submitted as space stations or associated space stations. Also to point out that WRC 23 has adopted a couple of new data items for the protection of radio astronomy in the shielded zone of the moon under provisions of 22.22 to 22.25. So from 1st January 2025, we are going to require for each submissions for reference body moon that they have to provide this additional information. Otherwise, it will be incomplete. And also to mention that, of course, WRC 27 under agenda item 1.15 is studying the use of various frequency bands for the surface of the moon as well as between the lunar orbit and the surface of the moon. So I quickly go through Earth stations. So far I'm talking about satellite networks and satellite systems that are not subject to coordination. So now I'm going to talk about Earth stations. And Earth stations, there are coordination procedures, which are listed here. 915, 917, 917A, 921, 97A. Most common is 917 and 917A. 917 is for specific or typical Earth stations in respect of terrestrial stations. And 917A is for Earth station in respect of other Earth station operating in the opposite direction of transmission. Sorry, so let me continue. So for 915, 917, and 917A, you have to do the coordination between the administrations before submitting to the ITU. All right, for these procedures, do not submit directly your coordination request to the ITU. You should submit it to the affected administrations. Now, how are you going to know who are the affected administration? Use our VR software GIBC AP7, okay, to generate the coordination area. And then any administrations that fall within that coordination area, you will have to coordinate with them. Now, for procedures under 9.21 and 9.7a, these are different. For this coordination procedure, you have to submit the coordination request to the Bureau before you notify. Okay, for this coordination request, Bureau will carry out the examination, identify the affected administrations. Results will be published in the CRC special section. Then, after you have done your coordination, yes, you go to the notification. So notification for recording is under 11.2. I have mentioned for the satellite network, but for Earth station, it is similar. Bureau will verify the completeness of the information, carry out examination with respect to conformity with RR and coordination requirement, and then we will publish them in a BRE. So last slide, I'm just going to talk a bit about the coordination area. What is the coordination area? It is basically the areas surrounding the Earth station beyond which the level of permissible interference will not be exceeded, and then coordination is not required. So that means within this area, you have to do coordination. Okay, now it's not an exclusion zone, doesn't mean that you cannot operate within this zone. It just means that you have to coordinate. Okay, how do you identify the affected administrations? The requirements are listed in Appendix 5. One example is shown here for 9.17. Okay, if you look at the condition, the threshold and the condition is that the coordination area of the Earth station covers the territory of another administration. Okay, and how do you calculate that? It is listed in Appendix 7. So Appendix 7 shows the details of the calculation and the determination of the coordination area, and the Bureau has implemented it in the software GIBC AP7, which I will encourage all of you to use. We will talk a lot more details about it during our workshop, so I will encourage all of you to participate in our workshop.